to have this conversation with Mark, and a few years back, I'm very happy that we have connected and helped me a lot on our journey of the M3DS Academy, and I would definitely love to have him on the podcast. So I will leave it to you to introduce yourself. You have a lot of experience. Mostly, I will say wisdom, because it definitely helped me out, and I'm very happy that you're going to share your wisdom with the audience.
Well, thank you very much, Stefan, for having me. I don't know if it's wisdom. Sometimes I think I'm wise, other times I think I'm a fool. But I think anybody who's really thinks they're clever all the time, they're usually wrong. So I think most people in life are divided into two categories, one of which is imposter syndrome, which most creative people have. But then you have some people who have Dunning-Kruger, which means they actually believe they're always right. And they're never worry. So a bit about myself. Originally from Ireland, now living in Australia. I studied architecture many, many years ago, back in the previous millennium, because my parents didn't believe that animation was a real career, and they wanted to make sure that I had a living, which is, a very sensible thing for parents to do. So I became an architect, got up to the level of being a lead architect. I never believed that was what I wanted to do. And this was luckily enough at the time when computer visualizations were becoming popular amongst architectural practices. So I kind of got into doing those, went back to college, went to the Ballyfermot College of Further Education as it was then. It's now called the Irish School of Animation, and studied animation and computer modeling. And after that, I thought, well, what can I do with this? Do I want to go back to working for myself doing computer graphics for architects? Moved to the UK and worked for Codemasters, and then for a company which some of my friends set up called Freestyle Games. I moved to Australia back in the year 2007, I think it was, working with a company there called Transmission Games. Then, as happens often, the computer games industry has very serious ups and downs. It's in a bit of a trough at the moment. But there was a dip in the games industry, so I moved into education. I moved into teaching in colleges and universities, usually doing 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, because you'd have extra hours in one place and a certain number of hours in another place. And from there, I was lucky enough to actually start learning some specific software which is used in film pipelines. RenderMan from Pixar was the first thing I did. I didn't have students who could learn this locally, so I started making YouTube videos. The folks from Pixar saw what I was doing and picked it up and actually gave me some work for them doing this. And from there, moved back into industry as an industry trainer. I moved to Canada, worked for Double Negative, then to the UK, where I worked for Industrial Light and Magic. After a few years there, I got an amazing offer to go and work for Epic Games, where everything was taking off about the Unreal Engine, and it was a fantastically exciting time to be there. So I went and worked for them as their education partnership manager for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, which is where myself and Stefan met, because we're doing an awful lot of work with universities, schools, colleges, online facilities all over the region, particularly around Unreal Engine 4 and as it turned into Unreal Engine 5.
When did you start in Epic Games? What year was that?
Well, I'd have to look at LinkedIn. It was about 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
About 5 years, I think. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was fantastic. That was like 2018, 19, starting out, and that's where we met.
And the role was supposed to take in visiting all these places. So I had hoped to come and visit you for the conference which you were running. Unfortunately, the universe had other plans for everybody, and COVID struck. So rather than visiting all these wonderful places all over Europe and the Middle East, I spent a couple of years in my living room in London, which was okay. But then I was fortunate enough to be recruited by Netflix Animation in Burbank, where I moved about 3 years ago. And from there moved back to Australia, where I'm an Australian citizen, have been for a number of years. working for Animal Logic, which is now part of Netflix. So I've been around the world a few times. I've worked in architecture, I've worked in games, visual effects, animation. There's very few things with computer graphics I haven't had some sort of touch with. And it's constantly changing and inspiring. Every time I think that we've reached the peak level, I remember back in the days of Lord of the Rings, when I saw that the first time, I thought, we can never make computer graphics better than this. And now almost everything is, like TV series are.
Yeah.
So around the world, around the industries, and I love what I do in terms of working with learning and development and training and education, because it means that I'm always in touch with the latest information. And I love learning things. And the best way to learn anything is to teach people and to share the information. I keep on saying this to people. If you really want to master something, become the teacher. Even if you're not the best person, if you're not the best violin player in the world, doesn't mean you can't be an extremely good violin teacher.
Yeah, sharing definitely helps you out. And we have a saying here. So repeating is the mother of all knowledge, for sure.
Yep.
And from there, that's why we love the M3DS Academy. That's why we're passionate about like teaching stuff to students, even though the good thing is that when they succeed, we are very joyful for that, because they reach a point where they can take off.
Absolutely. Look, having students who succeed, one of the great joys of working in universities and colleges, because universities and colleges have a lot of politics, and there's nowhere in the world which is an ideal workplace, but I've enjoyed working in these places. The great benefit, though, from universities is when you actually see students succeeding. When you go to a film, which I've done recently, and actually look up on the screen and see, I taught that person, and you just think, that's amazing. More so than even having my name up on the screen, just thinking, I helped these people to get there.
And the feeling is absolutely rejoiceful, I think.
Yeah. It makes it all worthwhile. Every time.
So what's the key point when you're teaching such a great artist, when you see them on the screen, the most successful ones? What the actual key points of in your career that you saw? So it's the hard skills, soft skills. What is the combination?
Definitely both are important, but if you don't have hard skills, if you don't have the technical skills and the artistic skills, very few people will be interested in hiring you anyway. So if we look at the hard skills, generally they come from practicing for a long time and giving yourself the permission to take time to learn. A lot of people think they should be able to learn something very quickly. And one of the first things that I would do with anybody who's learning software, learning art, is explain to them that you need to give yourself time. You don't think that your heroes, the people you see who've made great work, were born being able to do this. They practiced and practiced, and they started off doing very bad work, and then that work got slightly better and slightly better. A lot of people get disheartened, and that's the part of a teacher or a mentor a lot of the time, is to actually say, you're doing better than you did yesterday, and tomorrow you'll do better still. Don't expect that you'll get to the top of the mountain in 10 seconds. It's better to actually walk up and enjoy what you're doing along the way rather than try and race up. There's fewer accidents and it's actually more beneficial. So time is one of the big things.
Consistency.
Yeah. The second thing I'd say is reference. Like, learn from everywhere. Like, go to museums, look out your window, look at trees, look at the buildings around you. Be visually aware. We are surrounded by everything you see in life can teach you something. Everything. And if you train yourself to look, for example, for textures, if you look at a texture on a wall and think, okay, so why is there that stain there beside the window? And that's because the rain flows down the window pane, comes to the windowsill, and then flows off the edge of the windowsill and takes some dirt from what was settled on the windowsill down the wall. So figuring out why things are the way they are, with textures, with models, with animation, using your eyes, but being aware in a conscious way, being able to analyze. So the ability to analyze what you see and what's around you in the world is something which is a growing skill. It's something which you can do more as you go through life. Looking at other people's great artwork, whether it's paintings or whether it's film, that's a great way to learn things, because you can see how they have had an idea, could have been emotional, it could have been storytelling, and how they've realized that idea. An example of this would be, if you have a favorite film, reverse storyboard it. Like, watch the film, take it apart, make storyboards for it. But while you're making the storyboard for the final film, think about, well, why did they choose that shot? Why did they choose that camera move? Why was the light where it was? And if you do that, ask yourself those questions, you'll quite often teach yourself. In reality, I don't think there's any such thing as a great teacher. What there is somebody who allows somebody to learn and helps them. Teaching sounds like I can make you learn things, like a magical thing. It doesn't happen. But if you actually explain to people how they do themselves, that's the most important part of all this. The final thing which I'd say to everybody, any student or any person I work with, is learning is never finished. When you leave primary school, when you leave secondary school, when you leave university, you keep on learning. You will keep on learning for the rest of your life, because the world is changing very quickly. There's an expression in nuclear physics about a half-life, which is how long it takes nuclear isotope to have half the radioactivity. There's a thing called a half-life of skills. And it's reckoned now that the half-life of skills, whether it's programming or whether it's working in Maya or Houdini or Unreal, the half-life of a skill set in any of these fields is reckoned to be about 3 years. So in other words, in 3 years' time, half of the things which were useful to you today won't be. They'll have degraded in terms of importance. So you have to keep on adding and adding and adding to your skill set, learning new parts of it so that it keeps on growing. That piece I mentioned about back in the day when I saw Lord of the Rings, I thought this is the best ever be. That was the best it could have ever been at that point. But today, you would probably find very good university courses producing work of that quality, because the bar keeps on going up. The quality of software keeps on improving. People know how to do better things, and we don't know where it's going to stop, and I don't know if it ever will.
Yeah, for sure, because everybody will keep learning and it's going to improve everything. That's a very good thing that you point out about the learning curve, because everybody thinks that you're going to learn something in a few weeks and you're going to get even rich, I will say, because when you're starting out and learning the softwares, definitely you're going to have a barrier where the software will hold you down, and afterwards, when you learn those tools, you can improve and keep learning. That's a good thing that you mentioned, because nobody, like, when they get to one point, they just wanted to do the work and they're not improving their portfolio. So what is your point of view when somebody is working on their portfolio and also keep on learning and improving their skills?
Okay, so portfolio is something which, again, is never done. It's never complete. But one of the things with a portfolio is you need to have complete pieces in it. It's very hard if your portfolio is full of half-finished pieces. So when you're trying to get a job, particularly your first job, it's important to have at least 4 or 5 pieces which are complete and finished, rather than here's my works in progress. Those are interesting, have some of those. So you probably need to focus, and focus is a difficult thing without external pressure making you focus. Sometimes it can be good to work with a team of people who will keep you honest, keep you on track, or find a mentor. Or again, I've helped with ex-students in the past with this, but find some way to make sure that your goals are being met, rather than just trying something for a bit and then saying, "Oh, look, it's good enough. I've achieved something." That's okay for learning, but it's not okay for a portfolio. Again, for your portfolio, if you're working for a particular role, if you want to be a lighting artist, concentrate on that mostly and see if you can find other people who can contribute to the projects you're doing, so that they will do the modeling, the texturing, and possibly some animation, and you'll be able to put it in your portfolio or your reel with the lighting. Because if you try and do everything for your portfolio, and you really want to be a lighting artist, as an example, other aspects of it may actually detract from it. People may say, "Oh, the texturing, that is bad," or "the animation is bad." Find other people that you can work with.
I'm the lighting artist, but the model is not good. But I'm a lighting artist. I understand.
Again, you've got deniability there. If the model isn't great, you can say, "Well, I didn't model it, I didn't texture it, but I have lit it, and I've done the best lighting I can with it." And that's absolutely it. Another example of this, which is a frequent issue I've seen, particularly in the games industry, people spend a long time designing their resume or their CV, the list of things you've done in your life. So they'll do a lot of time graphic designing it. That makes perfect sense if you're a graphic designer. But if you're a modeler, texture, lighter, game designer, whatever it is, trying to actually spend a lot of time doing graphic design is trying to show a skill that you don't actually have. And it can make people who are graphic designers, and there will be some of them it'll pass under their, across their desk. So it'll just annoy them. So the things which you're not expert in, don't pretend to be expert in. Just do something simple and clean for your resume or CV, because that's showing that you recognize there are other people who have this skill set. But for me, these are just the things which I've done, and it's clean and legible. I haven't tried to turn it into this tremendous work of graphic design. It's wasting your time, and it's also trying to prove skills you don't have.
So you suggest leaving them out of the portfolio, the work in progress. Definitely, I've seen so many work in progress projects. So many. It's like not now, but few years back, it was like a trend, and everybody was like work in progress. And I would definitely say, I've seen models that have been work in progress for maybe 2 years, something like that.
In industry, you get paid to finish things. And it's good to know that you can finish things. The other thing which is an issue with portfolios is people show you their work and then they'll make an excuse for it. Well, it's not finished, or I had such and such happen. And you just think, well, you're coming to me unprepared. You're showing me work that you're not proud of. That doesn't bode well for, if you're put in front of a big name director, you can't say that. You can't say, well, I didn't have time to finish this, or I had to bring my dog to the vet. These are things that happen in your life, but you don't make excuses for things you put in your portfolio. It can be a smaller portfolio, but make sure the pieces you have there are things that you're proud of.
Yeah, definitely. When I see ZBrush artists, like this was done in 6 hours, but let's say, for example, the proportions are not good, and they will say different, but it's done in 6 hours. Nobody cares until the director wants to see your best outcome when they hire you. Especially the students particularly are interested in working for the big studios.
Yes.
And mostly they're doing that mistake. So it's a very good advice for sure. I'm very happy that they're going to hear from an expert that is working way too much into the industry, I will say, because you worked in Epic Games, Netflix, and there's such a big names, and you have been working with so many good artists, and you have taught so many artists. So when they're at the interview, when they create their perfect projects, they put it a lot of time. What are the interview tips for that?
Okay, the first thing is when you get as far as an interview, the company would like to hire you, pretty much.
Yeah.
They like your work. Seeing is if they feel that you're the right person for that particular job. It may be not just, some people say just don't be an idiot. But most of us aren't idiots, but there may be particular teams that need somebody who is, more forthright or more able to take direction. So there may be jobs which you don't get, not because you're a bad person or you're argumentative, but because you just don't fit in the team. I think many people have experience from sports teams where in a sports team, you may have 2 people who are very good at scoring goals and 3 people who are very good at defending. Now, if you're bringing in another person to that team, they have to be filling a particular role in that formation. So there are times when you may not be just the right person to fit in a team. And that's okay. That's not a criticism of you. So figure out what the position is, within it. I'm not just saying lighting, texturing, whatever, but within teams, there's a dynamic. There's a way in which people work. And sometimes you'll find a team that you work better with than others. It'll be to everybody's benefit. And it's a cultural thing. Different companies have different cultures. So figure out if you're a good fit for them and they're a good fit for you. That's mostly what interviews are about. If you go to an interview and they're asking you trick questions, I find that's a bit disappointing, because that shouldn't be what you're there for. You should be there to actually have a very clear conversation and from both sides consider whether this continuing relationship, whether we could actually work together and make the projects which we want to make. That should be what it's about, rather than, I don't know, some major tech companies have this question like, why are manholes round? Or how would you calculate the weight of an airplane full of ping pong balls? These kind of, which are tech company questions. But does that really help you to find out about the person? Maybe a little bit about how they work under pressure, but it's not necessarily going to let you share the way in which you work. Find out if you have a good conversation. Most people know within about 10 minutes having a conversation with somebody, whether they get on well with them and whether they leave space for each other, etc. Other things in interviews, I would say very important, is to prepare. Seriously prepare. Find out about the company. Find out about the people. Quite often these days, you'll have multiple interviews. My record for one job was 13 interviews. Lucky for some, I know. I've had some which were 8. So prepare, find out who you're talking to. Find out, again, if there'll be a follow-up interview, because I've had situations where I've had an interview, we discussed things, we discussed ways of doing things, and I actually changed my mind about some of them afterwards, because sometimes in the interview, they're asking you questions which you've never considered. And if after the interview, and this has happened to me, I wrote back and said, that point that we were talking about, I've been thinking about that. Can I actually not just change my answer, but can I chat with you again about it, because I found it really interesting. So this wasn't done particularly to show this, but it did show that I was present, I was thinking, I was amenable to change, and it was a conversation, the kind of thing which would happen at work. The final thing with all of these, whether it's interview, portfolio, demo reel, is if you can make the person on the other side, or the people on the other side, if you can have them imagine you doing the job, working in their office, being on their project, whatever it happens to be, if you can actually give that thought to their mind, then they'll start to very much be on your side. Say what you can offer. In your portfolio, you can actually say, if you're going to work for a company that does historical Japanese games, have lots of historical Japanese stuff in there. If that's your particular dream, when you're phrasing answers to questions, say things like, well, if I was working in your company, I know that you do this thing. You have a culture of, say, great feedback. And I've had experience in the past of companies without good feedback. So I'm looking forward to being able to work with having constant feedback and giving feedback and nurturing and whatever it happens to be. But putting yourself, imagining yourself there and saying what you will do when you're there and what you know what it's like there, that really does benefit you. It benefits you and them because you can find out whether it works from both sides. The interview is not just for them, it's for you as well to decide.
Wow, that's a very good point out. Because when they're going to the portfolio, basically that's why we wanted to change the culture of our students, because we don't want them to beg for the job, because eventually, immediately they were going to be eliminated from the interview, because the interview is also for them. That's a very good point out.
Yeah. There's one thing which I've seen which is happening less, which is a bit of a red flag as well. We've had people who've applied in various companies because they just wanted to work for your company. And they'll apply this week for a lighter and next week for an IT help desk person, and the week after as a barista, and then the week after as general manager. So whereas you can change what you want to do over time, don't just keep on spamming the same company with every job they advertise, because the first people who get it will be the recruiters, and they'll pass it on afterwards. But if they see somebody who's applied for 10 different jobs, they'll think this person doesn't know what any of these jobs are.
That's a very good thing, because definitely it's going to happen with I'm going to be a modeler, UV editor, texture, rigging artist, jack of all trades, for sure. So they are doing the interview. Basically, they got the job, but like you mentioned, it's an interview also for the artist as well. So
Yeah, they're good enough. They're good enough to have the job. It's a case of, does either side really want that? Are they the right person for it?
I wanted to ask you about the culture, because there is a cultural difference. Because everything that you said about the interview, when you go to the interview and it's weird, it's basically when it's an indie studio and mostly the artists will going to conduct the interview. But
Yep.
what here you mentioned about the culture difference between the companies? What's your point of view on that?
Some companies specifically design their cultures. Netflix has a thing online which you can read, which is the culture memo, which is about how Netflix organizes its culture. And other companies have similar things, like Valve have the Valve handbook, which I believe starts off with, nobody at Valve is your boss. And of all the people at Valve who are not your boss, this man is most not your boss. And it's a picture of Gabe Newell. And say, Gabe Newell tells you to do anything, say no. And at the bottom there was written, signed Gabe Newell. But, so in a company like Valve, it's a very flat structure, which has people can pick their own projects they want to work with, and they can move around and work with the people they want to work with. Other companies may be more hierarchical. So that will be a junior reporting to a mid, reporting to a lead, supervisor through to director level. That happens. Some companies have more of a culture of hiring people for long-term contracts. Other people will maybe do 3 months to 6 months contracts. It's, again, very dependent on the societal culture. So working in the UK and Canada and Australia and Ireland, they all have different ways of behaving, and their relationship with authority is different. In the UK, there's quite a strong class system. There's quite a strong belief in hierarchy. In America, there's quite a belief in hierarchy as well. But the difference is people are usually able to speak from say, a mid-level to a director level. That's perfectly acceptable. Some countries, you would very rarely talk to anybody who's less, one level above or one level below. find out about the culture is my advice. You'll be able to find out a lot about the culture in the company and potentially the culture in the country that you're moving to, because, different countries, even, the culture between France and Spain is significantly different. The culture between France and Germany is definitely different. In terms of the relationship to working hours, to how you deal with managers, to holidays, all these things have an impact. Find out about them and just be aware that it may be different from what you're used to. There's no two countries, no two places will have the same ways of working. Be aware though. Keep an eye out for anything which you see toxic cultures, because they do exist. They're fewer, and I would say of all the places I've worked in my life, games industry, architecture, film, and animation, generally working with very passionate people who are doing the best job they can, and there's not that much toxicity, but it does happen from time to time. You read about it in the papers afterwards. So be careful of that and take care of yourself and your colleagues. It's a rare thing, but it could happen in any industry.
Definitely, you point out a very good thought there, because everybody that is working in, let's say, for example, a studio, you mentioned that they're a team, and if you do help each other, definitely you're going to take care of your team, and the team will take care of you.
Yeah, everybody benefits, and you feel good, they feel good. It makes your work better. It just seems like such a, I wouldn't say no-brainer, but just such a logical thing to do, such a thing that just makes perfect sense. And at the end of the day, it's work. Take care of your family and yourself and your health above all, because if those things go, then you can't work.
So back to the application process, because we stopped there. What's the common mistake when somebody is like applying for a job? When, I don't know, what is the resume, the CV, what they should have, so it's going to be like a very good application? Because sometimes artists, they're doing a good art, but most of them are introverts, mostly now these days.
A lot are, yes. Okay, keep it short. Like for your resume or CV, it only needs to be 2 pages. It doesn't need to have a huge amount about grades or colleges, these kind of things. Sometimes saying that you have a degree or qualification can be useful, particularly if you're looking for overseas visas. Mostly what your resume or CV should show is accomplishments, projects you worked on, things you did for those projects, and how you think you had an impact on those. For example, so I worked on a film project which was about a cyberpunk society in the year 3000. I developed lighting rigs which were shared with a bunch of people and which benefited the entire team because they did this. So what you worked on, what you're passionate about with it, how it helped other people and the whole thing, that's really, really compelling, because the people who read that will see, okay, so you worked on this kind of project and you contributed in all these ways. You thought about it. Yeah, it's what you brought to it.
Mostly very good artists, they have so much self-criticism, and when you point out this, they're going to say, I don't want to talk good words about myself, and and definitely that points out, because that's the key thing of being at a company, being at a good team, because you're going to bring them so much benefits. And when you see somebody has already taken your job, for example, on that interview, and is very, let's say, less poor than you with skills and everything else, it's the key mistake of a successful artist, because they don't point out their skills and their successes, and they're like cursed by that. So they're not going to get the job.
Get a resume buddy or a CV buddy and swap and look at each other, and somebody who knows your work, and get their perspective, because sometimes that will be, look, I've done this in the past. I've got friends who are recruiting advisors. And even now, I've done so many CVs, I've done so many applications, but even now I'll still pass it by some of my friends for a second pair of eyes. Things that I've made mistakes in the past is I've used language which is less active. So I do things like, I would say, was responsible for making this change. Was responsible for is a really, really wishy-washy way of saying, I created this change, I did this thing, rather than saying responsible for. So use action words was one of the pieces of advice early on. But somebody outside will see what you've written and understand what you're trying to say. Quite often they'll bring a little bit extra to it that you don't see yourself. And whereas people may want to use, I'm going to use the words AI, may use it. I avoid using the term in most presentations, but you may use it, but it's not going to actually help at the end of the day. The last version has to be written by you. Unless the AI is applying for the job. But the last version should be your words.
Yeah, that's...
Whether it's a friend or AI. If you have no friends and use AI to give a different version. I do sometimes. Okay, I'll admit this. Sometimes when I'm writing a document, I'll put it into AI and say, can you make this more positive or can you make this more persuasive? And I'll look at what it said and I'll think, there's some ideas there, the same way you would if you had somebody else that you could share a document with. So you can use it. Different perspectives can be valuable, but different perspectives from a person, more so.
Yeah, for sure, because if you're using an AI or ChatGPT, never mind, on your CV is like changing your personality.
Yeah.
For sure, it's a no-brainer to do that.
But I know people who have done it.
That's a good thing that you mentioned. When I never thought to ask somebody to share my CV with them, so that's a very good thing to do with your teams or colleagues or something like that. But when you say that it's a good thing to be part of a community, and when you're working with, let's say, from your old colleagues, definitely you're keeping in touch with them. But what's the most best benefits of being at your community or building your community?
There's so many. It's a very slow burn. It's something which builds over time. You won't notice the difference immediately. It's kind of like if you go to a gym, the first day you don't notice much, but 6 months in, you're starting to notice changes. Communities take time to build. As they do so, though, you'll notice that things around them start to change. The community itself doesn't really notice the change because you're in there, you're in that pool, but you'll start to notice other things around will change. More people will be attracted to it. You'll find benefits in terms of feedback is a very important part for all artists. Feedback is really, really important. You may find people who are able to bring work to you, recommend you. And as well, if you are part of a community, it shows that you're able to work with a group of people in a collaborative way, which if you haven't managed to find your first job yet, that can be very, very good. It can also, to my mind, when I started to actually do online training materials, in the YouTube community, it gave me a voice to a much wider group of people that I could possibly have had previously. And I got feedback from them. It's people are what this industry is built out of. It's not built out of software. People are what we're built out of. So if you understand and build those connections and have much tighter sort of meshing with them, you'll find that you'll move potentially from company to company, because in visual effects, it's very common. In games and animation, a little bit less, but still common. But you'll maintain those connections through organizations like SIGGRAPH, or the Rookies, or Access VFX, or the Visual Effects Society, or whatever your local communities are. You'll maintain connections with ex-colleagues as well. So it's getting into the industry, it's working in the industry, it's transitioning between different companies in the industry. And eventually the community can be what you want it to be. it can actually bring more training opportunities to you, and potentially a lot of work is found between people in these communities before it gets advertised. Somebody will know there's a job coming up in a games company that they're looking for somebody to model vehicles, 6 months away. That job will actually be advertised probably 3 months away.
Yeah, it's a very good thing that you mentioned also, that so many wisdom words, like a fortune cookie. because
If I had a fortune.
because when you build a community, it's a very good thing, because somebody will join it that is at the start of, like, let's say, for example, a junior level. Even so, if you're
Yep.
a junior, you can start your own community, and afterwards everybody wants to see your progress and wants to see your succeed, and also will definitely share your works and everything else. But mostly after that, when you get to the top, I will say, you're becoming a mentor and a leader.
Yep.
So because you're a teacher, uh, how do you handle that? So because it's a big responsibility, because it's your
It is.
community and you're the example.
There's something else just back there which I'd forgotten in actual fact about community, which again comes down to a learning community, which is, I mean, we both worked in education. One of the greatest sources of knowledge and learning for students is from other students. People who are also at that phase of their development. Sometimes it's very hard for an expert to give somebody who's very junior information because they've developed so far they don't even talk the same language anymore. Whereas if you have a group of 30 students who are starting to learn ZBrush, they're all going through the same struggles every day, and they'll all find out one or two, three things, and they'll share them. And they learn so much from that community. That's the other thing I forgot about community. It's really, really great in education to have a well-meshed class. Now, in terms of being an educator and the responsibility of being able to mentor people, you can't mentor everyone. There's a difference between mentoring and coaching and teaching. So I think it's a case of you'll find some people who will benefit from each of them. Coaching, I think, is one of the things which is between teaching and mentoring, to my mind. Coaching, again, has the kind of connotations of sports teams where you can actually coach large numbers of people. But remembering that each individual on your team will have different needs. Some people need to be pushed and told, you need to try harder, you need to try harder. Some people need to be praised. Some people need different motivations. It's hard to know until you know the individual. So that's the kind of thing you can do as a mentor. As a coach, it's really, really difficult. You've got to try and find out, as a teacher or as a coach or as a mentor, you've got to find out what it is that will actually get the best work from the person who you're mentoring, which is a great way of actually becoming a better manager. That's one of the things which I advise people who want to become good managers or good supervisors, is actually do some mentoring or do some coaching of people who are junior, because that's phenomenal. If at the end of the day, you're able to understand people's motivations and get them to produce better work as a mentor, imagine if you're doing that as a manager.
Yeah, because I was speaking with one of our podcasts, Mark, and he is a manager of large teams. And definitely, he said, if you don't manage very good, you're going to have like over hours, and you're going to burn out your people that are working for you. So everybody that is joining the industry definitely will get, like, if they're searching for the top spots, they're going to become a supervisor, and definitely they're going to stop working as an artist and they're going to become a manager. So supervisor mostly is a manager, and they forget about that. So it's a good thing to have a group and mentoring them. So it's a very good thing. But when you mentioned something about students and their struggles, somebody are slow, somebody are fast, and different kinds of motivation. So what's the most common thing when you see, uh, and what do you suggest for them?
Oh, it's hard. Um, Again, self-doubt is one of the things which a lot of students have, and that's perfectly understandable. Uh, One of the things I see a lot is I can't draw. So many people have said, I can't draw. Now, everybody can draw. Some people draw better than others, but everybody can draw better than they drew yesterday. That's one of the most common things I see and hear every day, um, including some people working in industry. But it's the equivalent of saying, I can't write. It's a skill which some people have more ability, but everybody can actually develop it. So figure out the things that are weaknesses and turn them into strengths. If you are starting to draw today and drew every day for the next 3 or 4 years, just a little sketchbook, just do some drawings, draw the things which are around you, draw, what you see out the window. Don't even show it to anybody, but just keep that sketchbook and look at it in a year's time, and then look at it in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, and the drawings you're doing today. Everybody can draw. Everybody can understand how technology works better as well. So understanding a bit of, say, Python scripting is not too much to ask of people. The second most common thing I hear after I can't draw is, I don't do maths. Well, mathematics is something which is everywhere. If you can catch a ball when somebody throws it to you, you're not just doing maths, you're doing physics and maths at the same time. We all have intrinsic understandings of mathematics and physics, but we are often taught these things badly. It's the same with art to an extent as well. So people have a lack of belief in what they can achieve. And somebody once said, if you believe you can do it, or you believe you can't do it, whichever of those things you believe, you're right. So if you believe you can do it, you can usually do it. If you believe you can't do it, well, that's stopping you from doing it. Not all the time. I can't fly. I'm not Superman, but I'm learning it. And I'm very bad. Maybe in 5 years' time, I'll be quite good. It's achievable. Or human beings have managed to do the things which you think are impossible. And they're not that different from you or I.
Yeah. The most difficult thing is somebody to know the final destination of their career. So it's much easier like to say, I'm going to become a animator or director, either way.
Yeah.
So in years, 10 years time, you definitely can get there because you know the destination. And one thing I learned from my journey is like for stress. So everybody is going to say, I'm stressed about this, stressed about that. But mainly the stress is coming from not taking action. And that's the main thing.
Yeah. Look, starting projects is difficult. Procrastination is something which a lot of creative people have. There is a certain amount of procrastination which is actually positive, believe it or not. Like about 25% procrastination is good, because what you're doing is you're saying, well, I'm not ready to start this process, but your subconscious is quite often working on it. Not all procrastination, but a small amount of it can be positive. Stress from overwork is definitely a thing, and lack of sleep is a thing. Having people you can talk to about stress is important. Realizing that your mental health affects everything. Sleep is absolutely one of the most vital things to everybody's good health. If you're not sleeping well, no matter what else you're doing, you're not going to be healthy. But starting something, sometimes I will trick myself into starting something. I'll say, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. I don't feel ready to start this, but I'll just start this document. I'll just type out, I know I'm going to change it, but just so I've started it. A blank piece of paper can be very frightening. It can be very, very frightening because there's nothing there and I've got to make something from nothing. Whereas if you start typing off the first 5 or 6 lines that you think could be there, at least you've got something. It could be rubbish, but you've got something to change. So again, if you can find a way to get started, if you can find, quite often with creativity, if you can find the restrictions, if you can find, I've got only 10,000 polygons, or I've got to reduce the texture size, or it's going to fit in X amount of memory for games, for example. If you find restrictions, quite often that will make starting easier, because you're now not working in a huge canvas. You're working in something that you know has to comply with all these things. It's the same kind of thing in architecture. If you have a big empty field, it's very hard to design a house which is interesting. But if you have a cliff behind you and you've got some trees over there and a view there and the wind is coming from the southeast and the sun rises there and sets there, all of these other things will make starting easier. So starting is difficult and finishing is hard. Finishing is very, very difficult. And in the case of most people working in film, they're never really finished a shot. It's just, it's taken away from them and put in the film. They'd always love to do more. So being a perfectionist, that's one of the things that people say at interviews. Do you have any faults? Yes, I'm a perfectionist. That's not a good thing to say. It's got to be better than good enough, but nothing is perfect.
Yeah, it's better to finish it also on 90% than finish it to 100%. It depends on what you're searching, because sometimes you can get stuck in working on projects for such a long time. Especially we've seen with our students at the rookies, because they prepared. But I very do like the format of the rookies, because they are explaining the whole process of how they have developed their portfolio. So that's a very key point out to everybody. That is, even so, I've seen with people that are 10 years into the industry, they're just going to post few like pictures. They look good, I'm not saying that, but when you explain the whole process, it's like you repeating the process in your head and learning much more stuff. And also you're building automatically a community that even so they're going to learn from it. So
absolutely,
I'm very glad that you are also a judge there, because everything that you've said is, I'm stunned, and I'm very happy that you're a judge, because you definitely are seeing always the positive things of everybody.
It's a fantastic organization, and it's made a massive difference to the industry. It's made a massive difference. One of the problems that people had for a long time is not knowing what level they needed to aim for, and not believing they could actually achieve it. When you see other people from similar backgrounds, similar ages, similar cultures achieving, that changes your whole perspective on life. They did a test on this in America. They do lots of tests on students in America. What they did was they go to high school, and they go to the high school and they tell one class that, you know, one of the most famous people who went to this high school was a basketball player, and tell them the story about this basketball player. And then they go to the other class and they tell them that this person went to the high school was an astronaut, and this astronaut was a physicist and did all this kind of stuff. So that year, they looked at the results in science and across the board from these two classes. The class that had been told fed basically a lie about somebody who went to their school, who became a famous physicist and an astronaut. They did better at physics because they believed that somebody from their background and their school and their kind of area could do it. It was measurable, and it's a test which has been done again and again. If you actually can see people who are like you, who've achieved something, it makes a difference to what you can achieve yourself.
Basically, like we mentioned, the rookies are now the new standards also for portfolios. I'm very happy that everybody is doing a long breakdown, and I can see everything, and you can see even the passion in the students, because I'm very happy to work with somebody that loves to explain how they develop everything from start to end. Even so, the norm and the quality has increased a lot, and the technologies are
colossal. Yeah.
The technologies are improving. So my question is, where the industry is headed, like what is going to wait us for the future, what will look like for the 3D, because mostly I've seen games are becoming more like movies because you're going to play out the movie, so that's a very good thing. The cinema is slowly, like rapidly going downwards because everybody would like to see a series. I
Yep.
want to see a series from Lord of the Rings and it's coming out.
Yep.
So what's your point of view on that?
It's hard to know. Like, culture is changing so dramatically. Examples being sort of your TikTok generation, and Coco Melon is probably the biggest selling animation in the world ever, which is YouTube. So these are things which I never thought would happen, but they are. People are using their mobile phones, so it's the different format. It's not the wide format we're used to, but people are making videos within this, and it's becoming popular, not just for like your TikToks, but also for short animations and for series like that, because people prefer to hold their phone that way. How it's delivered, how it's developed will change, and will change quite rapidly. I think that what will not change so much is the things that tend to resonate are things that are connecting people. Storytelling is a way of actually sharing one person's internal life with another person's internal life. We all have internal stories. We share those stories with other people. It's a great way of connecting. Everything, I believe, whether it's writing or making, has some element of storytelling. I hope, and I believe this is going to happen, that more people will become aware of how to actually tell good stories, how to understand different storytelling techniques, because again, storytelling techniques are culturally different. The way in which a Korean story is told is different from the way in which an Indian story is told or an Irish story is told. There's different, I would say, tropes, but different ways of working with a narrative. And they're all interesting. They, learn about the craft of storytelling to start with. And then you can storytell through a painting, through an animation, through a song, through a book, but learn about what storytelling is. That should continue.
Yeah, mostly everybody, like we mentioned, also for using something like AI for writing the whole story and something like that. But mostly I've seen people using like for full, so they can produce the full project, but eventually their creative instinct will die out. And that also worries me a lot because it's going to become more quantity than quality. And I don't want
Yeah.
even to want to cover the AI. I want to skip that because it's overhyped. If you would like to say some words, okay, but I'm leaving it to you.
It's something which may be useful, and I think it is being used at the moment, but there is something about connecting people, and whether you're using whatever tools it happens to be, if you're connecting with people, I think that's massively beneficial. An example of this would be, I was walking through a shopping mall at Christmas, and they were playing music, just the music coming through the loudspeakers, which was happy Christmas jingly music, which is okay. It's kind of background music. And then they stopped that, and somebody started to play a piano live there in the mall. Now, everybody stopped to listen to the person playing the piano. Nobody noticed the music which was coming through the loudspeakers. But the person playing the piano was a personal connection between them and everybody there. So there's a certain magic there.
That's a very good comparison, I will say. That's all,
Yep.
I think.
Yeah.
So if I'm glad that you had the time to join, I would say, this podcast, but mostly I'm very happy that somebody will have a great outcome with this because everybody is struggling and everybody is saying, oh, where the industry is going. So there is a lot of fear into the industry.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, the industry now is down, but eventually will get up.
It will. Yes.
every time you've been for so many decades. Sorry for saying that, into this industry.
Absolutely. The biggest piece of advice I give everyone is seriously not to give up. Myself and everybody I know has come close to quitting at some point. It's just saying it's not worth it anymore. We're never going to get anywhere. But if you keep on knocking on those doors, making the work, applying for jobs, it does pay off most of the time. I'm not going to guarantee people's success, but I can guarantee people's failure if they quit. Nobody ever succeeds by quitting. The majority of people who keep persisting and trying will get somewhere. They may change direction, but not giving up is a very big part of what success is.
That's a great ending, I will say.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you,
What a
Mark.
pleasure.
I'm always stunned when I hear experts, especially your wisdom, and it's for sure you have been through a lot of students, and your patience is quite up high, and I'm very happy and very glad to hear your positivity, because you cannot see it in these days because of the terror and the fear, but mostly you always find a light in every dark story.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. And someday I hope to meet in person.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Signing off.